I put that one to the sainted writer, raconteur, and radio personality John Henry Falk shortly before his death in 1990. Falk, some of you old-timers may remember, was the popular CBS radio host hounded by the right wing out of his job and into the courts, where he won a very important case. In that interview, John Henry told me of how he and his friend Boots Cooper were playing in the chicken house behind their home in Central Texas when they were about 12 years old. They spied a chicken snake in the top tier of the nest, so close it looked like a boa constrictor. As John Henry told me, all of our frontier courage drained out our heels. Actually, it trickled down our overall legs. And Boots and I made a door through that hen house wall. John Henry's mother came out and, learning what it was all about, said to the two boys, "Don't you know chicken snakes are harmless? They can't hurt you." And Boots, rubbing his forehead and his behind at the same time, said, "Yes, Mrs. Falk, I know that, but they can scare you so bad, you'll hurt yourself." That's an important lesson to teach your students. I had to work hard to remember it at times. After the early twists and turns of my life put me in the White House as LBJ's press secretary, you applauded, but our credibility was so bad we couldn't believe our own leaks. It took me a while to get my footing back in journalism. I had to learn all over again that what's important for the journalist is not how close you are to power, but how close you are to reality. I would touch that reality in assignment after assignment, from reporting on famine in Africa and guerrilla war in Central America, to documentaries about working families in Wisconsin ravaged by global economics and corporate cruelty, to the remarkable Yamamoto family in Japan. I also had to relearn another of journalism's basic lessons. The job of trying to tell the truth about people whose job it is to hide the truth is almost as complicated and difficult as trying to hide it in the first place. One of my mentors many years ago at the university told me that news is what people want to keep hidden. Everything else is publicity. When you're digging for what's hidden, unless you're willing to fight and refight the same battles until you go blue in the face, drive your colleagues nuts going over every last detail to make certain you've got it right, and then take hit after unfair hit accusing you of bias, there's no use even trying. You have to love it. And I do. But I've had to keep reminding myself that John Henry Falk was right on. You can't spook out. When the indomitable Washington producer Sherry Jones and I reported the first documentary ever about the purchase of political influence by political action committees, we unfurled across the Capitol grounds yard after yard of computer printouts listing campaign contributions to every member of Congress. On that printout were names of politicians who had been allies of mine just a few years earlier when I was at the White House. Supporters in Congress of public television were also outraged. I learned something from that. There's a wonderful story about the medieval knight who goes away from the castle and months later comes back. As he rides back into the helmet is missing, his spear is broken, his horse is limping, his shield is rent. And the master of the castle looks down and says to him, "Sir Knight, what has happened to you?" And the knight looks up and said, "Oh, sire, I've been out pillaging and plundering your enemies to the east and the west." And the lord of the manor says, "But I have no enemies to the east and the west." And the knight says, "Now you do. Now you do." I suddenly discovered a lot of enemies. Later, when Sherry and I went digging into the Iran-Contra scandal in a documentary we called High Crimes and Misdemeanors, Washington's right-wing vigilantes ran to their allies in Congress who then accused PBS of committed in public the terrible sin, horrors of journalism. The Clinton White House also complained after we reported on the unbridled and illegal fundraising by Democrats in the president's re-election campaign in 1996. But I'm here to tell you that taking on political scandal is nothing compared to what can happen if you raise questions about corporate power in Washington.